My name is Estella. I'm 68 years old. I've been a widow for almost a decade, and I live alone in a red brick house in Charleston, South Carolina. I wake up early, prepare my strong coffee, listen to the noise of the seagulls, and go about the day the way I can. I never like to complain about life, but today I need to ask you something. How is it that a woman who gave everything, do you end up sitting in a restaurant, unable to afford lunch? Maybe you've been through this, or know someone who has, that feeling of being present in everything, helping in everything, and even so, be forgotten. I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about value, of respect. To be looked in the eye as if it still matters. A lot of people ask me what happened that day. Why were all the cards blocked? Why did my son, my daughter-in-law, and even her mother-in-law feel embarrassed in an expensive restaurant, unable to pay for even one dish? Well, today, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to open this wound calmly, because there are things that we only understand when we stop crying and begins to remember. This is not a story about revenge. It's about silence and the price he charges. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. There was a day, a clear, quiet Sunday morning, one of those that seemed to hold no surprise, when my phone rang. It was my son, desperate, with a choked voice. "Mom, why are all the cards blocked? We're here at the restaurant with Ashley's mom, and there is no way to pay the bill." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, because at that moment, he didn't know it yet, but that lunch would be a watershed in our history. What led to this moment? What happened inside me for me to make such a silent decision, and at the same time so definitive? It was something I heard, a phrase that I wasn't supposed to hear, and when I listened, I could never unlisten again. Before I tell you this, I want to ask you something very simple. If you've ever felt invisible, used, or left behind, stay here with me. Give me a like, subscribe, help me tell this story, because it is not only mine, it's from every woman who was ground, and one day it was treated as a carpet. I don't want you to just watch it. I want you to feel with me, because it hurts less when we don't feel alone. After my husband died, the house was quieter than ever. It wasn't just the silence of absence. It was that silence that hurts, you know? The sound of the clock hitting the wall hard, the noise of the kettle beeping to no one. At first, I tried to occupy myself with small things, taking care of the plants, organizing the drawers, watching old reruns on television, but it was Brian who started calling me more often. "Mom, are you okay? Do you need anything?" And I felt so grateful for that. I thought, he's taking care of me. But today I understand that those calls were the beginning of another type of relationship, one that only grew to one side. First was the entrance to the house. "Mom, I got a great loan. There are only $15,000 left to make the down payment. Can you help me?" Of course I did. I sold my old car, the one Robert had bought before leaving. It hurt, but it was for my son. Then it was the car itself. "Ashley's pregnant, Mom. Hers broke. We need to get by. Don't you mind borrowing yours for a while?" And the one time turned into months, then years, until the car turned around theirs, and I got the neighbors' rides to go to the market. And even so, I smiled, because at first we smile thinking we're doing the right thing, which is love, that this is what a mother does. And maybe it is, but the problem is that we don't realize when love becomes an addiction of others, when instead of helping, we start to sustain. Brian added me on a credit card. He said it was just to make it easier. "Mom, this way it's easier when we need to buy you something." But the invoices arrived, and the name on them was not mine. It was Ashley's. Clothes, salon, restaurants in Charlotte, new furniture for the baby's room. At first, I thought it was beautiful. She's taking good care of my granddaughter. But then it started to weigh down. And when I tried to comment, he said, "Oh, Mom, stop it. You have a pension, don't you? You'll never be in need." As if having money was the same as being well. As if the fact that I didn't complain was an eternal yes. Over time, they stopped asking how I was doing. The calls continued, but changed tone. They already came with an explanation before the request. "We're going through some trouble," or "It was only this month that it got harder." And I already knew that what came after was a value, a deposit, a transfer, a help, that there was no end. And I did. I gave it because I thought that, somehow, it kept me close, useful, important. And for a while it was true. They called me, visited me. I was the financial GPS of the house. But do you know what hurt the most? It was when I called just to talk, and Brian said he was busy, that he was going to call me later, that after never came, only when the card limit exceeded. I remember one day in particular. It was my birthday. I prepared an apple pie, set the table, put on the embroidered tablecloth that my mother had given me, waited. The hours passed. No one came. When night fell, I received a message from Ashley. "Happy birthday, Estella. We're running here with the boys. Then we'll pass it." They never passed. Not that day, not the next. Moment of reflection. Comment CTA. Is there anything worse than being remembered only when they need us? I'm not talking about gifts. No. I speak of presence. Someone remembering that you exist even when you're not offering anything. Sometimes, the greatest loneliness is not being alone. It is just to be remembered as a resource. If you've ever felt that, comment below. He writes, "I've lived it," or "It's true," because I know that a lot of people will understand what I'm saying. The strangest thing is that, even seeing all this, I continued to help. I thought, they're just going through a phase. It will get better. But it didn't get better. It was as if my retirement was their right, as if it were an anticipated inheritance. And I started to feel like this. A bank without a revolving door. A soft-hearted ATM. But everything started to change when, on a given Sunday, I walked into their kitchen with a tray of coffee, and I heard a phrase that wasn't for me, a phrase they didn't know I heard, and that's when everything turned. That's when I understood that the hole was much deeper than I thought. Do you know what I heard? That year, Thanksgiving was at Brian's house. Ashley wanted to make a sophisticated celebration, as she put it. "Nothing too traditional, Mom. It's going to be more modern this year," she commented on the phone. But even so, I woke up early, as I always did. I prepared 3 pies, pumpkin, apple with cinnamon, and pecan. They were old recipes from my mother, those that make the whole house smell like childhood. I took it with all my affection, wrapped in embroidered dish towels, thinking that maybe that gesture would rescue some family memory, some connection that I felt was missing. I arrived a little early, as I always did. When I walked in, I smelled food coming from cardboard boxes with fancy logos, catering, dishes too decorated to have been made at home, silver forks, monogrammed cloth napkins. It was all beautiful, yes, but cold, soulless. I placed my pies discreetly on the kitchen counter. No one commented. Not even a "thank you, Estella." Ashley's friends arrived with expensive wine, loud laughter, strong perfumes. They commented on the dishes served, praised the turkey with almond crust, the smoked beet salad. One of them said loudly, "Wow, everything is so beautiful. It doesn't even look like a family home." And they all laughed. I felt a lump in my throat, but I swallowed hard. I sat in a corner of the room with my plate. Shortly after, I saw my grandson Josh. I smiled, opened my arms. He came running, gave me a quick hug, and soon threw himself on the couch with the portable video game. He didn't even look me in the eye. I grabbed a slice of my own pie. It was still lukewarm. The taste was the same as always. But there, in that place, it seemed that it had no flavor. That's when I heard, on the other side of the room, one of Ashley's friends whispering, and even with the noise, I clearly heard, "Guys, does anyone still make pie like that? Don't the old women know that today the oven is digital?" There was a general laugh. And then, Ashley was there, next door. He also listened, but he said nothing. He didn't defend me, nor did he feign embarrassment. He just smiled, as if it were agreed. At that moment, something inside me trembled. I've never been a woman of confrontation. I've never been one to scream, but I know how to recognize when I'm being treated like a burden. And there, I was not invited. I was tolerated, an old ornament in the corner of the party. Do you know when we feel like we are left over, even with a full plate in hand? That's how I felt. Brian called me at dessert time. "Mom, the girls want to know who made these pies." For a second, my heart calmed down. I thought, now comes the recognition, gratitude, the memory of who I am. But he added, "To know where not to order next time. There's one here that was a little raw in the middle." I smiled. Only with the mouth. But inside, a wound opened. One of those cuts that don't bleed, but never heal properly either. That night, I returned home heavier than I arrived. And for the first time, I lay in bed and asked myself out loud, how long will I continue to accept being what is left in the lives of others? What does no one say out loud, but everyone thinks? What's next? I didn't expect it myself, because the following week, I heard something that no mother should hear. And then, yes, everything started to change. It was a Sunday like so many others. The sun was lazily beating down the kitchen window, and I was standing there, preparing a tray of coffee, buttery cookies, and a pot of mint tea. Ashley had invited some friends over for an informal brunch and asked me to help with the basics. I always helped. That's what I did. It wasn't my house, it wasn't my visitors. But even so, there I was, in an apron, setting everything up with the care of someone who expects a thank you that never comes. I put the tray in my hand carefully and walked around the house. Voices came from the room, laughter, clinking glasses, loose talk. And it was when I got close to the half-open door that I heard the phrase. One of them asked, "Who makes this wonderful coffee, huh?" Ashley replied, without thinking twice. "Estella, right? She's great. Our official funder. Literally a walking bench with a coffee maker." They burst into laughter. One of them added, "My God, where do you buy a mother-in-law like that?" I froze right there, without being able to take another step. I had the tray still in my hands, the steam of the tea rising, the smell of hot coffee, and the heart tightened. What stuck me there was not just the phrase. It was Brian's laughter. He was in the room too, and he laughed. Not maliciously, but naturally, like someone who listens to something they have heard before, as if accepting, as if agreeing. It crossed me in a way that no other word had done. It wasn't just a joke. It was a definition. That's how they saw me. Not as a mother, not as a mother-in-law, not as a woman, but as a mix of ATM and appliance. Always available, always working, always in silence. I took a deep breath, entered with the tray. I arranged everything on the coffee table. Ashley looked at me with that automatic smile. "Thank you, Estella. We love you." But it wasn't love that. It was convenience. It was customary. I sat on the porch for a while. I stood there, cup in hand, looking at the garden that I had helped to plant, and it all seemed to be a lie. The flowers, the mowed grass, the expensive pillows, all scenery, and I was part of the scenery. For the first time, I realized that my place in that house was not one of presence. It was a function, and that I only stayed there because it was useful, because he paid, because it did, because he kept silent. That night, already at home, I sat in the armchair and stared for hours at the empty wall. I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I just thought. Because there is a moment in our lives, and I wish you never have to get to that point, when the pain no longer hurts like a wound. It hurts like shame. Shame for having let it happen, to have allowed so much, of having called love what was deep down exploitation with a ribbon bow. And it was there, that night, that I decided that something needed to change. And it did. But not in the way they imagined, because I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't slam the door. I did something they never expected. Can you imagine what a woman like me can do? When do you finally realize the value you have? I returned home with my steps weighing more than my body. The day had been clear, sunny, but inside me it was as if a winter had begun that no one saw. I closed the door slowly, dropped the keys on the kitchen counter, and left my shoes in the corner, as I always did. But I didn't go on television. I didn't go to bed. I went to my armchair in the living room, the flowery print one that Robert hated, but after he left it became my favorite corner of the house. I sat there, without turning on any lights, just the distant sound of the street, a dog barking, and the echo of that phrase in my head, walking bench with coffee maker. I wrapped myself in the blue wool blanket, the one my mother had made before she passed away. It was as if only that cloth knew how to hug properly. I didn't cry, and that was what scared me the most, because before, I cried for anything, a souvenir, a song, a Christmas advertisement. But there, in that darkness, not even a tear came out. It was a deeper pain, a pain that feels like stone, who stays there still, weighing on her chest and drying everything around. I stayed there for hours. I didn't eat. I didn't speak. I didn't think about calling anyone. Because who do we call when the pain comes precisely from the people we love the most? I took the box of old papers, the one I always said I would organize one day. Inside it were receipts, vouchers, old cards, statements. I started to review everything. One by one. The storage room for the entrance to Brian's house. Josh's school tuition. That loan they never repaid. Made in my name, with the excuse that it was temporary. The electricity bills I paid in silence. The grocery shopping with my extra card. And I remembered of every hurried thank you, of every cold visit, of every absence disguised as a rush. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about what came along with it. The feeling that my presence was only welcome when I came with a paid ticket and an open pocket. I stayed there all night. No sleep. No desire to get up. Just existing. For the first time I felt old. But not old in age. Old to be forgotten. To be seen as useful, but never as essential. As if I were part of the plumbing in the house. No one sees it, but if it stops working, it becomes a problem. There, sitting in that darkness, I mourned. A mourning for everything I tried to be. For the mother I was, who never said no, even when her heart asked for it. For the mother-in-law who swallowed outrage disguised as a joke. For the grandmother who waited for calls that didn't come. For the woman who thought that by giving everything she would be loved back. That night did not have a pretty ending. There was no new beginning. There was only one silence. A bitter silence. But inside it, something began to change. It was as if a door inside me had closed. Not with noise, but firmly. A door that I myself had been leaving open for years. And that night, I finally locked it up. I'm here opening my heart, telling my story without skipping any part. If you're listening there, and it's touching you in some way, leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel. I still have a lot of things in store to tell you. Stories that hurt, but also liberate. And I don't want to tell you this alone, because it was after that night, that long, aching silence, that I got up with another head. And that dawn, I made a decision that would change everything. Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you suddenly stopped giving and start protecting yourself? So wait and see what I did the next morning. The sky was still dark when I got up. The clock read 4:12 in the morning. The house was silent, and I had that feeling that something new was about to begin. Not an ordinary day, but a new beginning. I went to the kitchen, put the water to boil, prepared my coffee, and sat in front of the laptop. It was an old device, with worn-out keys, but it still worked. I opened the bank's website. My fingers trembled a little, but my decision was firm. I clicked on the cards tab, and there they were. Mine, and the 2 additional ones in Brian and Ashley's name. One for her, one for family emergencies. I clicked on Cancel Additional Card. The system asked if I was sure. I took a deep breath and clicked yes. Then, I went to change password. I changed them all. That of the bank, that of the digital account, even that of the mobile operator. Each new password was like a new key in the door that I had locked inside me that morning. I went back to the joint account, the one I had opened years ago under Brian's name, just to make it easier in case something happened. And I laughed. Short, because what happened was just that. I got lost facilitating. I removed his name. Now that account was only mine. I took out my cell phone and opened the email. I wrote a short and direct message to Mr. Howard, my accountant. He took care of my investments since Robert passed away. I never asked him much. He only signed where he needed to. But that morning, my voice came out clear. Good morning, Mr. Howard. I would like to schedule a full review of my will, preferably this week. Thank you, Estella Whitley. Sent. I didn't leave a note. I didn't text Brian. I didn't make a speech. I didn't write any dramatic letters. Because I understood, after all, that silence also has strength. And when a woman like me stops explaining, it's because she learned. Afterwards, I went to take a shower. Slow, hot, unhurried. I took my navy blue dress, which I always saved for special occasions. I put on my necklace of small pearls, a gift from my wedding. I put on my favorite flat shoes, and I went to the market, alone, with my own card. I entered that supermarket as someone enters a temple, with firm steps. I got fruits, vegetables, cheese, good coffee. In the checkout line, the girl smiled and said, "Good morning, Mrs. Estella." I smiled back, because on that day the good morning was true. I spent my shopping. I grabbed my bag, and I left there with something I hadn't felt in a long time, belonging to myself. And it was only when I got home, put everything away, sat back in the armchair and looked at the sun slowly rising through the window, that I realized no one imagined what I had done that morning, but they would find out. The question was, when the cards were denied, who would call first? And what would I say when I answered? It was a beautiful Sunday. Clear skies, light breeze, those mornings that seemed to come out of a postcard. I had already had my coffee, watered the plants, read a piece of the library's new book. All was at peace, a peace so rare that I felt like keeping it in a small jar. That's when the phone rang. The number was familiar. I recognized it at first. I answered calmly, without haste. On the other side, Brian's voice panicking. "Mom? Mother, for God's sake, what happened? We're at McCormick and Schmick's with Ashley's mom, and all the cards were declined. Everyone. Mine. Ashley's. The one we use for emergencies. Nothing passes. Did you cancel?" I leaned against the back of the chair, crossed my legs slowly. He spoke fast, panting, like someone who ran a marathon of embarrassment. And I was silent for a few seconds. I wanted to see how far he went. "Everyone is looking here, Mom. Do you have any idea? We're with Claudia, and the waitress is waiting for the payment. Do you have any idea what a humiliation this is?" I took a deep breath and replied in the most serene voice I had. "I know, Brian. I know exactly what it's like to be ignored in public." On the other side, silence. A dry, uncomfortable silence. A silence of those who understood without wanting to understand. He tried to amend. "No, Mom, that's not what I meant. I just wanted to know if it was you who canceled it." I went. But why? Because I needed my money back, Brian. But what I needed most, it was back from myself. He was speechless. For a few seconds I even thought I had turned it off. But no, he was there. I just didn't know what else to say. "You could have warned you, Mom. Did you warn when you used it?" The conversation ended like this. No screaming, no scandal, but with a different weight. A real weight. A truth he was not used to hearing. And I hung up with steady hands. For the first time, I didn't tremble after a confrontation. I didn't feel guilty, nor regretful. Because there's one thing that no one teaches us when we become mothers. One day, if we're not careful, they stop seeing us as people. And we, in order not to lose their love, start to lose ourselves. Now listen well to what I'm going to tell you. If you think that was the hardest part of the story, it wasn't. There is still something coming. Something that hurt more than this phone ringing. Because the next day, he was not the one who appeared. It was Claudia. And what she told me in my own house. That's when I found out what I was made of. By the end of the afternoon that same Sunday, I was already in the backyard. I watered my hydrangeas calmly, very close to the hose that Robert installed with his own hands years ago. The sun was slowly setting on the wooden fence, and the sound of the water hitting the earth was almost therapeutic. That's when I heard it. First, the hurried steps at the entrance. Then, the knocks on the door, the insistent bell, and then, Brian's voice. Mom, please open it. We need to talk." Soon came Ashley's voice, louder, more uncontrolled. "Estella, please, that was humiliating. My mother, do you have any idea what that was? Everyone saw it." And her voice began to break into exaggerated sobs. "You should have talked to us before. I didn't have to do it that way." But I didn't move. I didn't go to the door. I continued watering my plants. From where I was, I could hear everything. Their voice going from demand to despair. The intonation that was once full of certainty now seemed confused, childish, lost. For the first time, they were outside, literally, and emotionally too, feeling what I felt on so many forgotten birthdays, on so many ignored dates, on so many times I called and no one came. Ashley was crying. Brian mumbled something about solving everything. "Let's talk, Mom, please." But at that time, it was no longer the time to explain. It was time to feel. They knocked on the door as if asking for help. But it was too late for that. Not because I wanted revenge. It wasn't about that. It was about giving back, with silence, what I had received for years. I crouched down to tend to the rose bushes. Each open flower felt like a small answer that I gave with my hands, not my mouth. They crashed for a few more minutes. Then, silence. Then, the car reversed. After, nothing. Moment of reflection. Comment CTA. There is pain that we don't wish even for those who caused it. But there are truths that only silence teaches. And sometimes, you have to leave the person outside, for her to understand what it is not to be heard. If you've ever felt that, comment below. He writes, "I understand you. Or I know how it is. Because this kind of silent pain, there is no revenue. But when shared, it hurts less. I finished watering. I closed the side gate, and I walked into the house as if that act of not opening the door was my first step out of the prison where I had placed myself. But the night had barely begun, because the next day, it was none of them who showed up. It was someone I never imagined seeing knocking on my door. And with it, the question came and took my breath away. The next morning, the sky was cloudy, as if the outside world was reflecting what was going on inside me. I made my coffee a little stronger than usual and sat at the table with my notebook and my laptop. For years, I was the one who said, "You don't have to pay me back. I do it with love. It's just money." But that day, I wanted to see with my own eyes how much of myself I had delivered, how much of my history had been spent on behalf of a family that, over time, stopped seeing me as part of it. I opened my documents folder, the one that was under the closet, full of statements, receipts, contracts, and printed emails. Each paper I pulled brought a memory. The entrance of the new car that I helped Brian to give, when the other one broke down and I couldn't ride public transport with 2 children. Their kitchen renovation, which cost nearly $15,000 and which Ashley said would add value to everyone's home. I found the email where she herself sent me the Nordstrom quote, "I need more formal clothes for the new job. Can it be on your card?" And it was. I remembered the children's health insurance bills, which I paid for 3 years in a row, from Josh's swimming lessons, the gym subscription that Ashley made in my name, and that, after I got tired of insisting that she cancel, I paid for a whole year myself. Each value I wrote down in the notebook seemed like a new cut, but I didn't cry anymore. It was no longer pain. It was lucidity, a clarity that only comes when we look in the mirror without pity. Then came the air tickets. They went to Napa Valley twice. New York, Aspen, always with some justification. End-of-year bonus, birthday gift, reconnecting as a couple. But the card I paid was mine. Always mine. I added up. Calculation by calculation. Line by line. I entered the digital statement and pulled the last 8 years. Every transfer. Every purchase. Every favor disguised as urgency. The final number made me stop. $92,347.25. I read it aloud. Once. 2. That's what I had given. And you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the value. It was the realization. They never asked me for love. They asked me for access. They asked for an appeal. And I, in the desire to be remembered, accepted all the charges. Love, I learned late. It doesn't come with an invoice. I printed the data. I underlined each passage with a red pen, each name, every justification, every just this once. I stacked the papers and put everything inside a blue folder. I put my name on the cover, and there, sitting, holding that folder as if it were a mirror of my history, I made a promise to myself. I would never again confuse being generous with being used. Now I knew how much I had given, and what he had received in return. And just when I was about to put it all away, the doorbell rang. I looked out the window, and my heart jumped, because it wasn't Brian. Neither did Ashley. It was Claudia, Ashley's mother, with an envelope in his hands. And what she said, it took me off track, because for the first time, someone outside that family said out loud what I myself could not admit. Can you imagine what it was? Claudia was there, standing on my balcony with a white envelope in her hands, and a look that mixed surprise, embarrassment, and respect. Yes, respect. Something I hadn't seen in a long time coming from that family. I opened the door calmly. I didn't call to come in. She didn't ask either. He stood right there, on the threshold, as if he understood that he had already crossed the line, and now needs to ask permission to breathe. "Estella," she said, adjusting her handkerchief around her neck. I came because I thought you needed to know." He stretched the envelope towards me. "Here's a statement that fell into my email by mistake. It was Ashley's. I thought it was for me, but, well, it has your name on several expenses." I took the envelope, opened it carefully. I recognized the lines, the stores, the values. There it was. Spa in Palm Springs, clothing store, aesthetic treatments, all paid for with my additional card. the same one Ashley used only in emergencies. I closed the envelope and looked at her. Claudia lowered her eyes and said something that stayed in my head to this day. I always thought you were too good. Now I understand that you were too strong to make a scandal. She turned and left. No kiss, no excuse, but with a heavy truth left there, on the balcony of my house. I closed the door. I took a deep breath, and that same day, I called Mrs. Caldwell, my lawyer. She was an elegant woman, one of those who use words like a sword, but with the delicacy of someone who sews wounds without leaving a visible mark. We scheduled it for Thursday afternoon. I took my blue briefcase. I sat in the armchair in her living room and placed the papers on the table. "Let's review the will," I said. She widened her eyes in surprise. "Do you want to remove Brian as a beneficiary?" "I don't want to remove. I want to reformulate. I want him to learn." We spent almost 2 hours reading clause by clause. The previous will left everything to him. My house, my investments, even Robert's piano. And there, that afternoon, we rewrote everything. I included a significant donation to the neighborhood community center, which houses widows and elderly people alone like me. I put a percentage toward a veteran support program, named after my brother who served in Vietnam. I also left a part for Miriam, my childhood friend, who always called me when I was sad, even without knowing why. And for Brian, I left the following: a conditional clause. He would only be entitled to an immediate symbolic amount, and the rest only after proving financial independence for 5 years. No cards in the name of third parties, no active debts, no loans from relatives. Mrs. Caldwell looked at me with those steady eyes and asked, "Are you sure, Estella? This is definitive." I smiled calmly. "It's not revenge, my dear. It is justice with a due date." I signed with a steady hand. I left the office with a lightness that I hadn't felt in a while. The breeze touched my face as if to say, "Now it's up to you. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. We need to tell these stories, because there are a lot of good women out there being silenced with pats on the back and empty promises. And now, with the will redone, my conscience cleared, and my heart stronger. Only one thing was missing: to return the key to the house. But not mine. Their key. Because there is an envelope that still needs to be delivered. It's a decision that will hurt them more than me. You already know what it is, right? The day was clear, but the air carried that tension that we feel before a storm. I had just folded the bedding when I heard the doorbell. It wasn't Brian's shy touch, nor Ashley's desperation. It was a firm touch, almost rehearsed. I looked through the window and there she was, Claudia, in high heels, a beige Chanel ensemble, sunglasses covering half of her face, and a perfume so strong that it seemed to want to invade the house before her. I opened the door. She entered without waiting for an invitation. "We need to solve this among mature women, Estella." I sat on the chair in the living room and motioned for her to settle down. I went to the kitchen, prepared 2 cups of coffee as I always do, but this time, without sugar, nor a smile. She took the cup and started. "You know that this card business, it was an exaggeration, right? A brunch misunderstanding. Nothing that needs to become drama." I stared at her as if watching a storm trying to pretend to be a breeze. Brian is devastated. Ashley then. She doesn't stop crying, and her mother is shocked by her reaction. All this was not necessary. I took a deep breath. I didn't answer. I just let her talk. "You have always been sensible, Estella. It has always helped. He always understood their lives. Why now this hostility?" "Hostility?" I asked. "Do you call hostility what I call the limit?" She sat back in her chair, uncomfortable. He lowered his glasses slowly, and then blurted out the sentence, "Look, I'll just tell you something. If you continue with this stance, they may seek legal means. You know that, depending on the situation, they can even declare someone incompetent. Have you thought about it?" It was as if time stopped for a second. I looked her right in the eyes, the cup still warm in his hands. I got up calmly, held the back of the chair firmly, and said, "Then they will have to prove that old age is madness, because heartache, it is not hurt." She tried to say something, but I was already standing, facing the door. "The conversation is over, Claudia." She hesitated but understood. He got up slowly, adjusted his expensive bag on his shoulder, and left without saying goodbye. I closed the door with dignity, not angry, but for sure. And there, standing in the hallway, I realized even the smiles I had given for years had been misinterpreted. They thought my silence was weakness, that my age was a sign of confusion. But little did they know that it was at this stage of life that we see more clearly, because only those who have been forgotten learn to remember themselves. And look, if you think all this is already strong, stay with me, because the most remarkable moment in this story is yet to come. Do you know that blue folder with the extracts, the italics, the evidence? So, it will have a destiny, and who will receive? You will never forget it. The week after Claudia's visit, I called Mrs. Caldwell again. She said she wanted to take the next step, the one she had suggested, gently but also firmly, a formal psychological evaluation. Not that I doubted my own sanity, far from it. But when someone insinuates that you are emotionally unstable or unable to decide on your own, the best thing to do is to anticipate it. Play by their rules, but in our own way. Dr. Evelyn Marks was one of Charleston's most respected psychiatrists, a woman with short hair, discreet glasses, and a watchful eye that seemed to cross us. Her office was quiet, decorated with light tones and the smell of lavender in the air. She greeted me with a welcoming smile. "Estella, feel free. This is not a judgment. It's a confirmation." The test lasted for hours. Questions about memory, logical reasoning, attention, language, tasks of remembering stories, interpreting texts, solving small everyday situations. And, between one stage and another, she asked me about my life, about how I saw the world, family, time. I answered everything with the calm of someone who has seen many seasons pass and still remembers the name of the flowers that bloom in each one. At the end of the session, the doctor leaned forward and said, "You have more lucidity than many young people I know. Its boundaries are clear, its sense of justice is intact, and your memory, bright. This here, Estella, is just a confirmation of what you already knew. They are trying to confuse you because you finally said no." She printed the report, signed it, stamped it, sealed it in a letterhead envelope, and handed it to me. "Keep that with your documents, not as a defense, but as an affirmation." I returned home with that envelope in my hands, as if coming back with a trophy. I opened my drawer, took the blue folder where the statements, the emails, the New Testament were already located. I put the report inside, among the silent proofs of my journey. Pause for reflection and comment, CTA. And there, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at everything I had kept, I thought, how does there be memory that hurts, but it also has memory that protects us? That reminds us of who we are, where we came from, what we've been through. You there, who listen to me now, do you have any memory like that? Something that has stayed with you until today, that gave you strength or made you see differently? If you do, share it with me here in the comments. He writes just one sentence, one moment. Sometimes, sharing the memory is what turns it into healing. I closed the folder calmly. I put it back in the drawer, and I looked around. The house was silent, but I didn't feel alone. I felt whole. But fate? He never rests. Because when we think the storm has passed, sometimes it's just the wind changing direction. And the following Saturday, I received a summons. Yes, official. And the name at the top of the paper was the one who should least sign that. Guess who it was? On Saturday morning, the sun hadn't even risen properly, when I heard 3 soft knocks on the back door. I thought it was strange, because almost no one used that entrance. I walked there slowly, and when I opened it, I ran into Lucy, my neighbor from the blue house around the corner. She had her hair tied up in a loose bun, a shy smile on her face, and an apple pie in her hands. I did too much. I thought about bringing a piece. "Do you accept?" I was surprised. Lucy and I always greeted each other politely, but we were never intimate. Still, I smiled back and opened the gate. "Yes, I do. It's been a while since I've tasted a pie made with care." We sat on the bench in the garden, the same one where I used to wait for visitors who didn't come. She put the pie on her lap and unceremoniously said, "Estella, I know I have nothing to do with your life, but I saw it. During all these years, I saw how they treated you." I looked at her, surprised. They arrived with new cars. The children ran straight to the tablet. And you there, with bags, desserts, a smile on your face. I saw you receiving boxes and more boxes with your name, but without even a thank you. And I also saw when they stopped coming. You kept smiling, but it was a smile of someone who was holding the world with both hands. Her words came like a warm rain after a long drought. I held myself for seconds. But then, I took a deep breath and let my eyes get wet. It was not sadness. It was relief. Thank you, Lucy, for having seen. I thought no one could see it. She touched my arm with affection. We see, Estella. Sometimes we just don't know how to help. We stood there, in silence for a while, and then she told me her own story. My son, Andrew, convinced me to sell my house in Greenville. He said he was going to invest in his own business, an organic coffee shop. And I, silly, full of hope, did it. I gave everything I had, in the name of his future. He paused, sighed. Do you know where he is now? In Florida. Married to a girl who doesn't even look at my face. He never called me again. We looked at each other for a few seconds, and then we laughed. We laughed the way only two hurt women can laugh. A tired but complicit laugh. You know what? She said. We deserve a break. I have enough points on the Delta travel card. Why don't we spend a few days in Savannah? Eat well, walk without haste, and simply exist without having to please anyone? I smiled back. It's been so long since I thought about myself that I don't even know where to start. But maybe Savannah is a good start. On that bench, with the smell of pie and the sun rising slowly, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. And you know, sometimes life puts the right people on our path just when we think there are only holes. But that Saturday was not yet over, because when Lucy left, and I walked into the house, I found the subpoena envelope on the table. And the name that was there, signed in black ink, was not just a name. It was a stabbing. Brian, my own son, what he was trying to do to me. I'll tell you in the next chapter. And look, you won't believe it. He arrived in the late afternoon, with his face half hidden by his cap and his shoulders slumped as if he were carrying more than he should, but less than he always wanted. He knocked on the door slowly, like when he was a boy and broke something and came to tell me afraid of being scolded. I looked through the glass, hesitated, but I did. He was alone. No Ashley, no child, no shield. Mom, can we talk? His voice was low, almost choked. I made a gesture with my hand and he entered. She sat in the armchair in the living room as if she did this every day, but she looked around as if everything there had changed. And there was. He began with the speech I had been waiting for. He talked about the rent that went up, the interest on the new car, the children's health insurance, Ashley's pressure, the sleepless nights. And then, as if surrendering to his own fatigue, he said, I made a mistake, Mom. We exaggerated. I should have thanked you more. I should have done more for you. But now everything is so hard. I just need you to help me again this time. That's all. I stared at him for a while. A long time. Mother's time. And then, I said calmly, Brian, this phrase is a trap with a bond of love. Just this one more time was what I heard when you asked for money for the renovation, when they put Ashley on my card, when I paid the down payment for the car. Each time it was just this one, and in the end, it became a life. He lowered his eyes. He tried to counterattack. You always said you'd do anything for me. And I did, Brian. But now, to do everything for you would be to prevent you from growing. He was silent, long, nuisance, but necessary. And it was there, on that sofa where he played with his father so many times, that he understood. He understood that I was not going to give in, that the time of dependence disguised as love was over. We were silent for a few minutes, and in that silence, I felt the weight leave my shoulders. For the first time, he was the one carrying it. He got up slowly, said, Okay, Mom, and went to the door. Before leaving, he turned his face one last time. I thought you would never change, and I thought you'd notice it sooner. The door closed with a soft click. There was no scream, not even tears, only truth. But that same day, when I opened my inbox, I found an email that would change everything. It wasn't Brian's, it was his lawyer's. And what was written there, it will chill even those who have never experienced anything like it. After that day when Brian walked out the door with more doubt than certainty, I knew the battle wasn't over. What I didn't expect was that the battlefield would now be made up of ringtones on the cell phone and notifications on the email. It started slowly. A message. Then 2. Then 5. Mom, answer me. Just to know if everything is okay. I'm trying to talk. On the 3rd day, the audios arrived. He said that the bills were due, that the situation had become unsustainable, that it wasn't just his fault, that Ashley was in a complicated emotional state, that the boys were missing their grandmother. I didn't answer. Ashley started sending screenshots. Overdue bills, negative balance, gym bill, even a receipt for a refused purchase at Target. One of the texts said, "We are going to lose the car, Estella. Is that what you want? Seeing your grandchildren without security? To see us embarrassed?" I closed the phone. I made coffee. I took my basket and went to the market. I picked out fresh apples, shortbread cookies, and a slice of carrot cake from the new bakery that opened near Main Street. I returned home. I put on classical music quietly and sat on the porch. I read another chapter of a book that I was forgetting on the shelf. The next day, the emails came. Subject, urgent. We're trying to keep everything running, but you let us down. I know you want to teach a lesson, but what if that lesson costs us our stability? Please, Mom, just a conversation. But I had already talked. For years. And no one listened. Now my silence was the only language they needed to understand. And I'll tell you something, which maybe you on the other side understand with your heart, and not just with your ears. Sometimes, silence is not absence. It is presence. A presence that forces the other to see himself. Icebreaker, sign up and like CTA. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling we help another heart to breathe. So if this story is touching you in any way, like this video and subscribe. Who knows? Maybe it reaches someone who needs a push to respect themselves more. The days passed, and something unexpected began to happen. Brian stopped texting. For a whole week, no sign. Until Lucy, my neighbor, told me that he had gone to ask for a personal loan at the bank. Later, I learned that he started doing freelance work. And later, that they sold the second car, that expensive model they had financed just for status. Ashley, the proud, started working part-time at a flower shop downtown. They say he complained about the heat and pollen, but he went anyway. And their house? They put it up for sale. And they went to live in a smaller condominium. All this, without me saying a word. I continued to live. With dignity. With serenity. I went to the park early in the morning. He visited the local museum. I even started embroidering again. I read 4 more books. I tidied up the family albums. And when I looked at the phone, he was mute, like me. But silence has a sound that only those who need to truly mature hear. And it was on a rainy Sunday, with the smell of wet earth coming through the window, that the phone rang again. This time, it was not requested. It was something else. A choked voice, a short sentence, and an unexpected visit, which changed the course of everything. The rain was hitting the roof lightly when the phone rang. It was one of those gray Sundays, with low skies and hot coffee in a big mug. I answered slowly, already knowing that the call would not be just any. "Hi, Mom." Brian's voice was different, less rehearsed, less armed, and more real. "I just wanted to tell you that we're trying." Really. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't charge anything. He didn't blame anyone. I just said that, and he hung up. It was on that day that I understood that my silence had been heard. Not with the ears, with the ego, with the soul. The following days were revealing. I continued my serene routine, and little by little, without searching, the news was coming. Ashley was seen leaving the supermarket with simple bags in her hands, hair tied in a hurried bun, sneakers on his feet. No heels, no expensive purse, no pose. I was with the 2 boys and smiling. I also learned that she started taking her children to school. Early in the morning, sometimes in the rain. Something that she used to say was babysitting. Brian? Oh, he learned to cook. Simple recipes, but made with patience. The neighbor next door commented that one night, he saw Brian in the kitchen, helping little Josh with his homework while stirring a pot. And perhaps the most symbolic, they started paying their bills on time. Installments, yes, but without delays. No one came to tell me this directly. I heard it from the edges, market comments, a nod from Lucy with a smile like, "You won without raising your voice." And look, There was a phrase that crossed me like a hot knife in butter. It was said by an old neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, who met Brian in line at the bank and then came to tell me, "Estella, your son looks different." And I just replied with a calm smile, "Growing up is painful." There was also a flower shop involved in this story. A bouquet of lilies and lavender arrived at my door. No ticket, just a blank card with a sentence printed on it. "You were right." I recognized the handwriting right away. Claudia, Ashley's mother. I didn't answer. I didn't even need to, but I kept the card. In that drawer of the hallway closet, where are the things that don't shine, but liberate? The grandson's first drawing, the photo of my wedding day, the letter from Brian's teacher when he passed the year with effort, and now, that little piece of paper. Pause for emotional phrase. And you know, there are people who think that justice is noise, revenge, screaming, but sometimes, justice is just seeing who humiliated you need to grow, and you choose not to watch from the balcony, but to continue living, with dignity, take it easy, with soul. I felt that the story was reaching a turning point, not for them, but for me, because when we give up fixing others, we finally start taking care of ourselves. And it was by taking care of myself that I decided to do something that no one expected, not even me. One last silent action, that he would leave an eternal message. Want to know what it was? Just wait and see. Sunday dawned with a light breeze, one of those that shake the curtains of the living room as if it were a soft warning that something different is going to happen. I got the message on Thursday. "Can we have lunch on Sunday? We take everything." 4 words that carried a whole world behind them. I took a deep breath before answering. I just wrote, "I'll be home." At 11 a.m., I heard the noise of the car parking. Brian came down with 2 Trader Joe's bags, a shy smile, and a simple t-shirt. No expensive markings, no disguises. Ashley came close behind, with another bag, and the boys holding hands. There was no hurry. There was no tension. There was an air of someone who finally understood what it means to be present. They entered as if asking for permission. Brian gave me a kiss on the cheek. Ashley, with a lowered look, said, "We brought everything. Can I use your kitchen?" I just nodded, and I saw the 2 moving between pots and spices, with a naturalness they had never shown before. It was not a pretense. It was an attempt. And that was already a lot. The boys ran to the backyard, played in the grass with the cars. I heard their laughter as the soundtrack of a moment I didn't expect to live. In the kitchen, Brian chopped vegetables. Ashley stirred a simple but fragrant sauce. Between one task and another, they spoke to me with a delicacy that was not forced. It was new. When we sat down at the table, the dishes were hot, and the atmosphere calm. It was then that he looked me in the eyes, with a sincerity that hurt more than any scream before, and said, "Mom, I'm paying my own insurance now, and you know what? I'm sleeping better." I didn't respond right away. I just smiled. It was not a smile of pride, nor of superiority. It was relief, a relief that only a mother who carried her child inside and then outside can feel. The food was good, simple, true, as everything should have been from the beginning. After lunch, the boys brought me drawings. One of them, made with crayons, was from a house with flowers, and in the middle, a woman with white hair and a blue dress. "It's you, Grandma." I kept that paper with the same care with which I kept my New Testament. There, in that backyard that has known so many silences, I felt something different. Peace. Not a full peace, but that small and precious peace that appears when we stop trying to fix others and begins to rebuild. I knew there could still be relapses, that the promises of change sometimes slip away, but now, I also knew how to do something I never knew. Say no without blaming myself. That's it, folks. Changes everything. The sun began to go down. They gathered the table, washed the dishes, said goodbye with hugs. Ashley looked me in the eye, and for the first time without haughtiness said, "Thank you for having us." When they closed the gate, I stood for a few minutes, looking at the sky painted pink and orange, and it was there, in silence, that I realized the cycle had turned, but there was still one last thing to be done, something that has been kept for too long, a letter, never sent, written in a dawn of pain, and that now it needed to be read. The sky was tinged with gold as I sat on the patio, with the blanket folded over my legs and a steaming cup of tea in my hands. It was a warm, late afternoon, one of those that hug us without touching. The street was calm. No cars passed, only the sound of the leaves dancing with the wind and the birds returning to their branches. It was as if the world outside was also quieting down inside. I stood there, looking at the stones on the ground, the plants that grew half crooked in the flower bed, and thinking about the life I led. How many times have I annulled myself thinking that this was love? How many times have I called generosity what, deep down, was fear of losing the little affection they gave me? I don't regret helping. I don't regret the signed checks, the bills paid, the grocery purchases that arrived in the hands of those who said they loved me. But I regret one thing: never having taught that love also needs limits. We think that motherhood is a bottomless pit, that the more we give, the more we are loved. But now, at 68, I understand that those who never learn to hear a no also never learn to grow up. And grow hurts. I look back and see myself in every silence I swallowed. On every birthday I was invited just to not cause trouble. Every time I prepared food with care and received an "ah," I ate it on the way. In each call that only came when the money ran out. And I ask myself, how is it that an entire woman becomes just an account number? I know the answer. That's when she thinks she needs to justify herself even to exist. Today, I don't justify myself anymore. I learned that dignity is not a luxury of young people, full of independence and beautiful words. Dignity is the gift that old age gives when we finally stop explaining ourselves. And it's funny, because it wasn't anger that set me free. It was calm. I didn't have to shout or slam doors or make a scandal. It was enough to remain silent. It was enough to stop. It was enough to choose me. And suddenly, all that love that I had been pouring out without return began to come back. Not in the way I expected, but in the way I deserved. Today I understand that loving a child is not freeing him from everything. It is teaching him to fall, to get up, and to be thankful when there is no one else to hold his hand, only himself. I look at the trees in the backyard and think, they have also lost leaves. They also faced strong winds, but they were still there, standing. And me? I am too, for the first time in a long time, standing, with a light heart, and his eyes more open than ever. And it was with that look that I decided to open that drawer, the one in the hallway closet, the same one where I kept Claudia's card. Between the yellowed papers and the boy's drawings, there was an envelope, unnamed, no date. But I knew exactly what was inside. A letter, written in the early hours of the morning, when it hurt too much to sleep, when I was still trying to understand why their love weighed so heavily. It was time to read it, from the front, out loud, because sometimes, what we need to hear the most, that's what we wrote ourselves. Do you want to know what that letter said? So listen, because her words changed everything. I sat on the porch, the sun setting on the Charleston skyline, and took a deep breath, feeling the breeze touch my face. Brian and Ashley gradually learned to walk on their own. Brian now managed his own finances, paid for insurance, and even found pleasure in cooking for the family. Ashley reduced the extravagances and began to actively participate in her children's lives, with responsibility and care. The boys, Josh and Emily, were closer, and the house gained a lightness that had not been felt for years. I was finally at peace, feeling that I fulfilled my role as a mother, but this time without giving up myself. I learned that true love is not a tax paid with tears or infinite sacrifices. It is a lesson in limits, resilience, and recognizing that each gesture given without return needs to be balanced with self-love. We are not obliged to carry the world in order to be loved. We are taught to protect ourselves, and thus teach those around us to grow too. To you who have accompanied me here, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. The like you give is like a hug that warms up and supports this channel. The subscription is like an invitation to come back to the next cafe, to share more stories, more laughter, and reflections. Tell me in the comments of which city you are watching. Let's create this corner of conversation and welcoming. And don't forget to activate the bell, so you don't miss it when the coffee is ironed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next real story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story. I was good. I was forgotten. But now, I am free.